The NCAA tournament is in full swing. Now it's in the home stretch. We have 2 of our 4 final 4 teams set, and we have another Locked On bracket breakdown as the number 3 seed Gonzaga Bulldogs fall to the 4th seeded UConn Huskies 82-54 on Saturday evening. I'm Isaac Shade, and we are joined by the host of Locked On Zags, Mr. Andy Patton. And Andy, I'm sorry to have to talk under such fraught circumstances here, but can you just put into perspective what went wrong in this game for the Bulldogs?
Yeah, a whole lot of everything in this one right there. I mean, you read the score, 82-54, which you didn't have to. You could have left that out.
I apologize.
No, it was a rough one for Gonzaga on both ends of the floor. The outside shooting was just non-existent. It just was not there, and it felt like certainly there were some bad shots. I don't think that any game goes by where a team doesn't take bad shots. But for the most part, a lot of Gonzaga's looks from 3, I didn't think were that bad. Yeah. Like some of them were a little rushed. Some of them, maybe they could have made an extra pass. But there was a lot of instances where they had good looks and they just continually did not fall. And we knew this team was going to struggle on the defensive end of the floor. We knew that Adama Sanogo was going to play really good basketball on his end. And what he was able to do was really facilitate the offense for UConn by being more of a distributor, something that we've seen from him at times this year, but he really buckled down and did excellent there. And for Gonzaga, just not rotating quickly enough on defense. We saw many instances of Sanogo getting the ball, getting double teamed, and then whatever guard is supposed to rotate down just didn't show up. There's instantly, you watch highlights, you can see Rasir Bolton watching Andre Jackson dunk the ball because he didn't rotate there in time. Like there's multiple instances of that. And for Gonzaga, like their starting guards had a absolutely horrendous NCAA tournament. That is the politest word I can use to describe the NCAA tournament that those 2 players had. It was just bad. And again, talking about Nolan Hickman, he took a lot of good shots. Like he was open. He couldn't hit the broadside of a barn. I don't know what happened. And this kind of happened to him last year too. And it was like, oh, it's a freshman kind of wear down towards the end of the year. But this is 2 years in a row where when the Zags need him most, he's just not there. And for Rasir Bolton, a guy who, this is his 5th year in college. Yeah, 5th year in college basketball. He's been at 3 different schools. He's been a ultra reliable competitor for the last half decade. And over the last month of the season, he just had an incredible vanishing act for the Zags. And for Mark Few, I don't know how you can prepare for 2 of your guards to just completely disappear when you need them the most. And he did what he thought was best, which was play a whole heck of a lot of Malachi Smith. It worked against UCLA. It just didn't work here.
And Andy, the result of all that is a season low 54 points for Gonzaga, the only time scoring under 60 this season. Yeah. A lot of the talk ahead of this game, or honestly, the majority of the talk ahead of this game was the battle in the paint between Drew Timmy and Adama Sanogo. But as you alluded to, Sanogo acted a lot more as a facilitator, and it was actually Jordan Hawkins that turns out to be the leading scorer for UConn. What is it that Hawkins did so well to get to those 20 points?
Yeah, he hit big shots, and some of them were well contested shots. Some of them were wide open shots. But for the most part, I think I don't want to say that UConn used Sanogo as a decoy, because that feels like the not quite the correct terminology. But I'll stick with facilitator, because Gonzaga has utilized Drew Timmy in this way in the past, and quite often. I mean, Drew Timmy led Gonzaga in assists this year. That's not something that I think a lot of people would have necessarily expected, but they facilitated through him. And UConn wasn't really doing that with Sanogo a bunch this year, but it really worked well in the game plan today. And again, that's a shout out to Dan Hurley and their staff for coming up with a game plan that worked, because they knew Gonzaga's slow on their defensive rotations. They've been slow on their defensive rotations all year long. And so it wasn't a shock that if Sanogo gets the ball, if he gets double teams, if he can swing it out, the rest of the guards are going to get open looks. And Jordan Hawkins, Mark Few said it before the game, he's one of the best pure shooters. I think Mark Few said he is the best pure shooter in college basketball. That is the phrase that he used to describe Jordan Hawkins. You can imagine, if he's saying that to the press, that his whole game plan coming into this game was, don't let Jordan Hawkins get open looks. And yet Gonzaga, a team that was, barely in the top, I don't even think they were in the top 80 defensively, or around top 80 defensively in KenPom rankings. That's not their strength. It wasn't their strength all season long. And they got away with, playing well against UCLA on the offensive end of the floor. They got away against TCU, but they come into this game, don't play well on the defensive end of the floor. And this is what happens.
Drew Timmy missed the last several minutes of the first half and then picked up his third and fourth fouls in quick succession in the second half, rendering the tournament's leading scorer benched.
Mhm.
How could have Gonzaga had any hope of overcoming that?
Well, I'll say this: the fourth foul on Drew Timmy, I hate that call, and I think you can make an argument on, and it probably was a foul, but I
That
hate
was
that
the
he.
push off?
Yeah, it was the little kind of push off with his elbow under the basket, didn't have any impact on the actual play. And I'm not going to argue whether it was a foul or not. And I'm also absolutely, unquestionably not going to make the argument that it had any significant bearing on the result of the game. Gonzaga got absolutely blasted from that point forward. Could you make an argument that Drew stayed in the game a little longer? Maybe they don't let them go on that big run. They don't have to play from behind. Maybe, but Gonzaga couldn't hit a shot. So I don't think that foul matters all that much. For Drew, it's an extremely unfortunate end to his collegiate career. We assume technically he has another year of eligibility. He has made it pretty clear he plans to be done after this year. I doubt he changes his mind at this point. And it was tough to see him have such a Herculean effort against UCLA, this incredible jaw-dropping, legacy-defining performance against the Bruins. That doesn't get to be his final game. Instead, a weird kind of goofy foul that he committed kind of is like the lasting legacy, the final moments for Drew Timmy. And that sucks. There's just no other way to say it. It sucks, but that's the kind of the story of college basketball.
Well, and Timmy shared what looked to be a very special hug with Mark Few as
Yes.
he left the court for the last
Mhm.
time. I don't mind saying I had tears in my eyes.
Yeah.
Like that's just what happens in college basketball is we lose these young men that we watch for years. And so, Andy, as you saw those two men embrace who have defined the last 4 years of Gonzaga basketball, and obviously much longer for Mark Few, what went through your head?
Unfortunately, how often we see this is kind of went through my head. I mean, Gonzaga has worked so hard in the last 3 years to erase the moment of Adam Morrison crying on the basketball court. Jalen Suggs erased it in 2021 with that 37-footer. Julian Strother emphasized erasing it by beating UCLA with his own deep three-pointer. But at the end of the day, one of the lasting memories of Gonzaga basketball in the NCAA tournament is Adam Morrison crying on the court in 2006. And now here we are 17 years later with Drew Timmy. He didn't quite have tears the way, it certainly wasn't as devastating of a loss as a 17-point comeback like it was back then. But only one team is happy at the end of the NCAA season. There's only one team. Gonzaga has come so close to being that team so many times. And yet here's another season where their season ends with them not being the team that's happy at the end. And it's tough. It's sad. It's heartbreaking every single time. I think to myself, why do I make myself so emotionally enraged every March for decades? But here I am. And guess what? I'm going to be in the same spot next year too.
Well, it is indeed the end of an era with Drew Timmy most likely moving on to the next part of his life and career. It'll be a big offseason for Gonzaga as they look to retool and reload and try to run it back in the WCC and on the national scene next season. For more on the Gonzaga Bulldogs, make sure you are subscribed to Locked On Zags. And for a full view of the bracket and all the action, hey, subscribe to Locked On College Basketball. You might see the two guys you're looking at right now coming at you on that show. Both shows, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.